The rain last night was different. My name is Charlie, and I want to talk about what just happened at my dad's farm. It all started when my dad came in out of the field, sweaty and wide-eyed. He fixed me in his gaze. "Get your shoes on and get out here. We got a problem." His tone didn't allow for disagreement, so I threw on my shoes and my jacket and snatched my gloves on the way to the door. I was new to farm work. I had to move in with my dad after my mother passed a few months ago. It had been hard on me, but I haven't had the emotional energy to process much. I've been throwing myself into work and school. I'm going to college online. But more often than not, I get volunteered for farm chores. I'm not used to hard work, and I tend to whine a bit, but I try my best to work hard when I can. My dad opened the door part way and then shut it. "You know what? On second thought, wait right here a sec." He went to the garage and returned with some painter's masks. "I don't want either of us breathing this stuff if it's something toxic." I put on my mask and my gloves. "What? What kind of stuff?" "Follow me." The situation was apparent immediately once we had both stepped outside. Although by apparent, I mean pretty strange. There were little chunky, grayish, oily blobs, looking a bit like cooked ground beef, littered everywhere. How did this happen? "I'll tell you what," Dad said. "I was fixing the stupid tractor, and it rained on me. Almost got the whole farm. It is everywhere. It looks like meat. Try smelling it. On second thought, don't. It smells awful anyhow. Like fried sugar, gasoline, and vomit. Burns your nose like bleach, too. Here, check this out." He bent over and ran his finger through the grass, coming up with a small handful of the stuff, and he wrung it out. A thick, milky gray fluid squeezed from it, splatting onto the grass. "Yikes, you sound like you got quite the whiff." "I don't know that I'll ever forget it," he said. We spent the rest of the day tending to the animal spaces, clearing out the troughs and getting them fresh water and uncontaminated food. It was a lot of work just to get all the critters into enclosures and cleaning everything. Getting the meat in the fields would have to wait until tomorrow. The goats were the hardest because they were really getting into the stuff. Mabel, our oldest goat, looked at me guiltily with a mouthful of nasty meat when I told her to stop, and just kept eating. I ended up bringing them into the barn. By the time I showered off and got into bed, I was so exhausted I passed right out. The crickets that night seemed louder than usual, but I didn't think much of it at the time. In the morning, I didn't see Dad down at breakfast, so I assumed he'd gone out to work. I ate some cereal, then got on my laptop and messaged my instructor, letting him know there'd been a bit of a family emergency and I might miss the morning session. I put on my gear again and went to check on the animals. It was eye-opening, to say the least. On the walk up, I couldn't help but notice the field. Many of the plants had wilted and blackened. About half the chickens were dead. Some of the other chickens were pecking at the corpses, and I cleared them off and bagged the bodies before giving them some feed and moving on. They seemed aggressive today. The dead chickens had lost some feathers, and looked like they'd been pretty badly henpecked. They also had open sores with grayish, milky pus running off of them. I was careful to remove every drop of the gray goo and bag it with the chickens before moving on. The other animals weren't much different. I felt a tightening in my gut as I went from pen to pen. All the goats in the goat pen were gathered to one side, chewing hungrily away at something. I thought maybe everything was fine, but when I got close, it turned out to be what was left of one of the other goats. The cows had lived, but most of them were very sick, lethargic and covered in the same sores. By the time I started to walk to the pig pen, I changed my mind and went back to the house to get my dad's gun. There was nothing for it but to start culling. When I got back into the house, I saw my dad sitting at the kitchen table. He was hunched over his coffee. "Hey, Dad," I said. Hey, son. It's good to see you. He slurred a bit. He was sweating pretty badly. Have you been drinking? You look awful. He scratched his arm, and as he pulled back his sleeve, I noticed the same blisters I'd been seeing on farm animals all this morning. Dad, you're not well. I'm calling the hospital. Don't bother. I'm fine. You're not. Have you been outside? Half the animals are dead, and the other half are probably on their way. Half, huh? I haven't gotten out to check all morning. I got a bit of a late start, that's all. That's when I noticed I could smell it. Him. It smelled just like he'd said. Gasoline, with an acrid sweetness that irritated your nose and sinuses like bleach and the smell of vomit. I grabbed his gun and my phone and put my mask back on. I dialed 911 and put it on speaker as I stepped off the porch and started walking out to the pig pen. In the pen, there was death everywhere. The pigs had torn each other apart. One of them had its face almost entirely chewed off. Most of them were missing hooves, eyes, faces. One remaining pig, covered in sores, was the last remaining. I raised my gun to shoot just as 911 picked up. 911, what is your emergency? A woman of indeterminate age spoke. Her accent sounded somewhat Midwestern. My dad's sick. Some kind of poisonous stuff got into everything on the farm. I don't know what's wrong, but most of the animals are dead, and I'm scared he's next. I gave her my details, and she reassured me, telling me to stay calm and someone was being dispatched as we spoke. She also asked if I wouldn't mind talking to a specialist so they could gather more information. I said sure, and I heard the auto dialer dial out and start ringing. While it rang, I thought about Mom's death and about Dad being sick. I set the gun down against the fence and squatted, leaning against it. Hi, is this Charlie Benson? A voice said. It sounded like a man in his 30s, authoritative but congenial. Yes, I said. The weight of what was happening was really starting to bear into me. Tears started coming down my face. Hey Charlie, I need to gather some information. Are you able to talk? Yes. Great. This stuff at your farm that is making everyone sick. Did you get a look at it at all? Yes. Great. Was it a powder, or like a goop, or... Kind of like a goop. Honestly, it looked like ground beef. Dad said it smelled awful, but I haven't had the pleasure. I see. Your father, did he eat any of it? Eat it? Why would he do that? He said it smelled awful. Ah, if he smelled it, he almost certainly ate some by now. What? What the hell is this stuff? What's happening to my dad? There was a pause on the line. I can see you're upset. We need you to stay calm, so let's focus on getting calm for a moment, okay? He led me through some breathing exercises and talked to me about how my dad was doing and whether I'd been showing any symptoms. I assured him I haven't so far. I didn't notice at the time how deftly he changed the topic from the basic question. I still don't know what is happening to us or why. I decided to write to let you know what has happened so far. It's been almost 30 minutes since I called 911. I was about to call them back, but it looks like someone's here. I don't see any ambulances, though. Just a bunch of cars and vans parking out by the road. Everybody's got hazmat suits. Some of them are unloading equipment, and some have guns for some reason. A few of them are making their way up the path now. I hope they're here to help. But honestly, I'm pretty nervous. The weirdest thing about all this is I just can't get the way Dad smelled out of my head. I am having the worst thoughts.